Hi, my name is Zofia Stawierska, and I'm here today with Apoorv Ranjan, who is a master's student at the Electric Propulsion and Plasma Laboratory here at Purdue University. Apoorv, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Apoorv. I'm originally born in India, and I did my undergraduate degree here at Purdue University in the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics with a focus on aerospace materials and combustion. I'm currently a graduate student working at the Electric Propulsion and Plasma Lab focusing on plasma diagnostics. I had initially worked with Dr. Shishoran my junior year, and the focus of that independent study was working on the Hall effect thruster in lab and trying to essentially get that to function. Following that, I had conducted some research at the Indiana Manufacturing Institute, looking at composite manufacturing, and just through this process during my undergrad years, I got interested in the whole process of conducting research and felt invested in developing my skills and going into research in academia, which is why when Dr. Shishoran was said that he was looking for a master's student to work on a project, I was quite excited, and that's how I came to join the EPPL.
So, can you talk to me a little bit about what your specialty is at EPPL?
So as of now, my research is looking at the verification, not verification per se, but the validation of the Thomson microwave scattering diagnostic technique, which is a technique that uses microwave scattering to determine number density of microplasmas. And I'm using that currently and trying to compare that to a known diagnostic method called the hairpin probe, which is also used for similar measurements, in order to effectively kind of justify the validity or the accuracy of TMS, the Thomson microwave scattering.
So, in a previous video, we talked with Adam Patel, who also worked on a similar type of diagnostics. How does your work differ from his?
So the main differences between our work is we're both looking at Thomson microwave scattering. The main difference between ours is that one, I am comparing it to a different diagnostic method, and two is also the type of plasma that I'm looking at. I'm looking at a simple column glow discharge, which is just in a glass tube I ignite and I get a simple, stable, steady state glow discharge, whereas his is a laser-induced plasma, so that's pulsed based on the laser frequency, and his is definitely a smaller plasma. We operate in similar pressure regimes, however, his is definitely on the length scale of a few micrometers, if not smaller. Whereas mine is, my plasma volume itself is around 10 centimeters long and 1.5 centimeter diameter, which is quite large, much larger than his plasma.
So, when you run your experiments, what type of outputs are you analyzing?
So for the two different sets of experiments, so there's the Thomson microwave scattering where the plasma plasma volume is placed between two microwave horns, and what's being measured there is the radiation scattered by the plasma volume itself. So when you have the two microwave horns, one is radiating, one is receiving. So the radiating horn is just emitting a radiation of, so I'm operating between 2.6 and 3.9 gigahertz, which is a significantly lower frequency than Adam's system. And so it's emitting radiation at whatever frequency within that band. And the receiving horn is placed 90 degrees basically out of plane. So whatever I am reading on the receiving horn is basically just a scattered signal. It's not being transmitted directly from the horn. And so when the plasma ignites, the plasma channel itself acts as a dipole antenna, and that results in scattering of that signal in a Hertzian dipole radiation pattern, which should be picked up by the receiving horn. And so that comes into my RF circuitry where I have a heterodyne system. So I am upconverting from 3 gigahertz to 11. And so that signal comes into my system and can be output on the scope as just whatever level is being read for the radiation as some voltage. And on the hairpin side, it's a tube with a modification around the top that allows me to input a silver loop that's bent like a hairpin, hence the name hairpin probe. And that is connected to 2 loop antennas, which are connected to the VNA. And so with that, when the plasma is ignited, there's a perturbation of the electric field around the hairpin loop, and that's picked up on the VNA in the form of a frequency shift. So the VNA will read one peak frequency that's corresponding to the hairpin itself. And once the plasma is ignited, that frequency peak shifts corresponding to the influence of the plasma itself, the plasma frequency. And with that, it's using that difference between the original frequency peak and the shifted one, I can determine what the plasma frequency is, and from that I can calculate my number density.
Okay. And you take those numbers that you find in the experiment and then compare them to already existing baselines, correct?
So I'm comparing them against each other.
Okay.
So I'm getting 2 measures for the absolute number density measurement, and with that I can compare the 2 systems.
Okay. What problems have you ran into as you've been working on this experiment?
So many. So one of the major problems we found initially on the side of the hairpin was that from our preliminary study we found that when the hairpin was placed in the glass tube, there was a significant shift. So for your reference, the hairpin has a resonant frequency that we read on the VNA. And that resonant frequency is based on the length of the hairpin. So the hairpin is a quarter wavelength resonator, so 4 times the length of the hairpin, it corresponds to the wavelength of whatever frequency that peak should be.
Okay.
We found that once it was placed inside the glass tube, this resonant frequency was being perturbed significantly. And so there were a lot of issues with kind of trying to figure out whether or not this would affect how this would affect our final result, and if there was a way to build a system that would allow the glass components of the tube to be far enough away from the hairpin for us to conduct the experiment, which is what we ended up doing. So, which is why we're at such a low frequency, is so that we can have a larger tube that does not perturb the E field around the hairpin probe itself. And on the side of Thomson, there are issues with circuitry. And so because I'm using a heterodyne system, all of our previous works have used a homodyne system, which means that it's been one frequency throughout the entire circuit, from the source to the horns to everything, this one frequency range. Whereas in my system, I have one level of input that's at 3 gigahertz, that's at the horns, but my down conversion system. So what we're doing is we're taking this signal that is at 3 gigahertz, and we're converting that to a DC signal, right? And that's being done with the IQ mixer. Since the IQ mixer we have in lab is rated for 10 gigahertz, and what I'm doing is I've created a heterodyne system that converts it from 3 up to 7 intermediately, and then that mixes with the signal coming in from the horn, and that moves back up to 10. And then there is a local oscillator at 10 gigahertz as well, and that is what I use to down convert. So there's 2 different frequencies. But the issue with that as well is that there are a lot more complexities within that circuitry. And that's currently something that we're trying to sort through right now, is making sure that all the components are behaving as they should, that there is no error or saturation in the system, and if there is, basically that will affect the data being recorded, and so that's what is currently in the process of being sorted out.
We mentioned this a little bit before, but can you talk about the difference between why you want to look at intrusive versus non-intrusive diagnostic methods?
Of course. So the application of Thomson microwave scattering is aimed at microplasmas at rarefied pressures, which means that we're looking at very small plasmas at very low pressures, which means typically lower number densities, right? Because the reason why this is relevant is because this is the area of plasma technology which is in very great demand. Like it's a very sought after and area right now, because we're having developments in like plasma medicine, different types of plasma technologies, plasma antennas, things like that, which all operate in this regime. And so the issue is when you have a intrusive form of diagnostic, you are introducing a physical probe into the plasma. And especially at this small scale, and I know that the current experiment I'm working on is working at a larger scale that allows for us having a probe inside the plasma. But for example, with Adam's experiment, if you were to fit a probe in the middle of that plasma,
It's very small.
It's a very small plasma, so one is constructing a physical probe to be able to do that. And if it's a large probe, then at that point you're just pertubing the plasma. There's a giant physical object that will obviously change the properties that you read, which is why a non-intrusive method of diagnostic is preferred and ideal for that scenario.
So can you talk to me about potential applications of this work, either in industry or academia?
Yeah, so the main focus for this research is we wanted to create a non-intrusive diagnostic system for microplasmas at rarefied pressures. These conditions specifically because this is an area of interest that's currently growing quite rapidly within the industry. Applications range all the way from sanitation, development of technologies like plasma antennas, for example, or metamaterials, and there are spaces within like medical research as well as for electric propulsion itself. In fact, one of the applications of Adam's system is to run diagnostics on the Hall effect thruster at some point.
Which is another piece of equipment that you have at the lab.
We have at the EPPL, and also in general, it's to be able to kind of perform diagnostics on these electric propulsion systems, which is incredibly important for the future of space travel. Yeah.
Do you know how this work is going to be further developed by the lab in the future?
Yeah, so definitely there will be more research done into the Thomson microwave scattering system. In general, looking at different plasmas, for example, different applications, as well as looking potentially, if Adam had gone into this briefly in his video, looking at different regimes, because currently the research I'm conducting is in the Thomson regime. However, between the Thomson-Rayleigh, when you're in that intermediate regime where collisional frequency is prevalent along with the microwave frequency there, it's not as simple as just ignoring one of the terms, because that's what currently we're able to do, is say that the collisional frequency is low enough to where the microwave frequency is the dominant factor here, and we can just ignore that term in the equation. So one specific future study that I wanted to look into for this experiment specifically is, given the fact that my plasma is contained within a glass tube, we had a lot of concerns regarding whether or not the glass tube itself is significantly perturbing the electric field. And so one study would be looking into that, and the plan for that is to place a, for example, like a 3 gigahertz antenna inside of the tube and then irradiate it with the microwave radiation. And the point of that is, given we know effectively for like a certain distance away what the electric field should look like just based off the analytical equations. We know that if you have a microwave source at this point, we kind of can estimate what we're supposed to be reading like a certain distance away. And with this experiment, we can quantify kind of how much we're deviating from what is expected and how the glass tube itself is influencing the field. So that is definitely something that we wanted to look into, because the importance of this is we're not necessarily always going to have a freestanding plasma, much like the case Adam discussed. If the plasma is enclosed in some other material, it's necessary to quantify how that will be influencing our data and our results, if at all.
That makes sense. All right, well, thank you so much for talking with me, Apoorv, about your research and your work at the EPPL. Thank you for watching, and if you want to learn more about what work is being done at our lab, please refer to our website as well as our YouTube channel for other content.